Hi, my name is Dale Maley. In this short video, I'd like to tell you about a recent project I just finished. Some background on this project. Back in 2006, I built two of these garden trellis benches for my sister's garden. But I made a mistake. I made those out of common pine, which doesn't hold up very well in the outdoors even when it's painted. So that first set of two lasted until about 2014, and I built two more to replace them. But this time I used pressure treated wood, and they're actually still in good shape in 2025. Now my sister's expanded her flower garden, and she requested a third bench. So the first thing I had to do was find an old SketchUp drawing or a pattern to make a third one. And I thought I'd drawn this in SketchUp back in 2006, but when I checked my computer files, I didn't really start using SketchUp until 2009. So finally I figured out that I used a paper plan from Delta, and I still have that plan. And I did a Google search. You can still buy a copy of that paper plan from eBay as of June of 2025. The paper pattern is good for marking out the pattern for the top arches that go on this bench. Now here's a photocopy of the picture of the bench that comes from the paper pattern. Here's a screenshot from eBay that shows you can still buy the paper plan. It's actually Delta Woodworking Plan number 80-151 trellis bench. Overall dimensions 74 inches by 60 inches by 29 inches. So you can still buy that paper plan from eBay as of 2025. So I did go ahead and transfer the paper pattern over to SketchUp, a free drafting program, in June of 2025. To build this bench, I used pressure treated lumber, including 2x6s, 2x4s, and 1x6s. And then the plan calls for using 3/8 bolts to bolt things together. I upsized that to 1/2-inch galvanized bolts. And then I bought some post anchors, they're called, galvanized. They bolt onto the bottom of the wooden legs, and then the galvanized part goes into the concrete. Bench is fairly easy to build, but one tricky thing is the top two curved arches. The plan calls for gluing on two short pieces of wood on each end of a 2x6. But pressure treated does not glue very well. It comes in different phases of wet. Sometimes it's pretty dry and it will glue up. Sometimes it's pretty wet and it won't. So I suggest cutting out the two little curved pieces that you need, and then glue and screw them into the main curved pieces. And we'll see that in a second. You can see in this photo on the left hand side where I glued and screwed the little triangular piece on the end. That way it'll stay in place using the screws. One thing about this project, you do need to think ahead to transportation. In my case, I built this in my garage, and then I transported it by pickup truck about a mile across town and did the final assembly in my sister's garden. And a pressure treated bench like this can really be heavy. So I decided to make it in pieces with the front and back main structures, which are two of the 2x4 vertical 2x4s with a horizontal 2x6 screwed on. That way I could assemble in the final location. I did add two locators under the two end horizontal bench pieces that let me set the proper front and back distance. So here's a photo of where I started the dry assembly in my garage, and you can see the front and back main vertical pieces. So then I took two of the horizontal bench pieces and I put little blocks inside to set the correct front to back distance, and I temporarily held those in place with bar clamps as shown here. Then I actually went ahead and built up the whole unit in my garage, then disassembled and took to my sister's garden. It is a little tricky to get the three lattice or trellis pieces in the right location at assembly. So to aid me in that, I made a 3/16 thick Luan plywood angled piece or guide piece, and it really worked well on both ends. You'll see a photo in a second. So the first thing I did was screw on the 3 horizontal pieces. You can just mark those with a tape measure. And then I screwed on the vertical piece, which you can also just use a tape measure. Now for the outer 2 angled pieces, I used my Luan jig to properly locate the outside angled pieces as shown in the photo. I clamped it temporarily, then I screwed them in place. Boy, this really worked very fast and efficiently to put those 2 outer pieces in the right position. So here's a photo showing when I had the bench dry assembled in my garage. Next step will be to disassemble it, transport it in a pickup truck across town into my sister's garden, and reassemble it. Now if you Google it, you'll see that for pressure treated, about everybody says you have to wait 3 months to let it dry before you paint it. Well, I've been doing pressure treated outdoor stuff for about 12 years now, and my method, I never had a problem with paint peeling prematurely or anything. So I give 1 coat of Zinsser primer, then I give a 2nd coat of exterior latex gloss paint. I will assemble the planters in the final location that are on the sides. Now here's a photo of all the pieces needed to build this bench. This is after I took it apart, I guess, at this stage. Anyway, everything's ready to load up and take it over to my sister's garden. As you can see, there's quite a few pieces involved building the bench. Here's a photo showing the assembled bench in the final location in my sister's garden. And there's 4 temporary legs to hold the bench up until the concrete is poured. At this stage, I'm ready to install the galvanized extensions and then pour the concrete around them. Now at this stage of the project, I had an oops moment. My sister told me that she wants to add 1 inch of sand on top of the dirt and then add some 2-inch thick concrete pavers on top of that. So I needed to raise the bench up about 4 inches above the ground. Well, that's easy using the temporary legs, but once you raise it up, now the galvanized extensions on the bottom of the wood legs won't reach far enough down into the concrete. So I decided to solve this problem by adding some steel onto the bottom of the brackets. So I drilled 2 holes in each bracket. Then I had some leftover 90-degree shelf angle brackets. I straightened them out a little bit and I bent a hook on the bottom. Then I bolted them together. Now the brackets will be deep enough into the concrete when I pour the concrete. Now in this photo you can see where I installed the brackets to the bottom of the wood legs using 1 long bolt, and I'm ready to pour the concrete at this stage. You can also see I've bent a 1-inch long hook at the bottom to kind of better retain the bracket in the concrete. And why do I use the brackets? Well, they keep the wood legs from contacting the dirt. If you didn't use concrete, the thing would fall over. And then if you put the legs into the dirt, it will rot out the legs pretty quickly. So the brackets separate the moisture from the wooden legs, and it lasts quite a while. So here's a photo of the bench after we poured the concrete. And I did not stir and mix up the concrete first and put it in the hole. I used an alternative method where you dump some water in the hole first, then put in some dry concrete, and then add some more water and more concrete till you fill it up. And after a couple of days, it will be set hard enough. And then you can remove the 4 temporary wooden legs after a couple of days of letting the concrete set up. So at this stage, the 3rd bench was basically completed. I went back and I found a photograph of the first bench I built back in 2006, a photograph with my father, Charles Maley, on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, he died 3 years later in 2009. So some closing thoughts on this project. It is a relatively time-consuming project. It took me several days to build it up in my shop, and then it just took half a day to install it at my sister's garden and put in the concrete. It is relatively easy to make, but you do have to think about transporting this very heavy bench if you build it in your shop and then you moved it outdoors or moved it to another location. And the pressure treated bench, based on my experience, should last more than 10 years. Probably needs repainted after about 8 years, but it should last for many years. So this short video explains how to make a garden bench with a trellis on both sides. Hopefully this video helps you on your projects. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe. Thank you.